seriously, you're spend a lot of money on that education, and now you're making YouTube videos. Because I think when people think YouTube, think of this low kind of media.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
What's the deal, everybody? This is LawFlip. It's a conversation about law, life, politics, building, tech, music, everything in between. So I'm Benjy Smith with Benowitz.
Ni hao.
Welcome to our guest, a big name in the makerspace, Ben Uyeda. Ben stepped away from the award-winning architecture firm he co-founded, as well as an Ivy League teaching position to develop media companies that deliver affordable designs to the masses. Ben's ideas have been reached by more than 50 million people, and the free designs he gives away are being built on 6 different continents. So if you get something out of the show, if you get anything out of the show whatsoever, please like, share, comment, rate. Let's flip the game upside down. Okay, so Ben Lewis, how horrible is doing expense reports?
Slightly more pleasurable than a tonsillectomy.
I would say just as bad, if not worse, than spending a lot of time at the DMV.
So get your time back with Rock Paper, the revolutionary smart payment system that empowers modern business users to create physical and virtual credit cards with programmatic spend controls. It also automates the entire expense report process for you. It's at rockpaper.com/lawflip, ROCKPAPR. There's no E, ROCKPAPR.com/lawflip. Stop doing expense reports now. Join the movement. You started off as an architect, and what drove you from being a somewhat traditional architect to being a content creator?
Well, it was really about affordability. When I was practicing architecture, as you get more successful, you don't necessarily take on more clients. Yes, you can scale the firm, but what you really try to do is take on more prestigious clients. So if we were focusing on single family houses, we were doing some really interesting work relative to sustainability. But the more magazine covers we got, the more press we got, it just allowed us to be more selective about our clients. And then the next thing you know, we're designing, $5 to $10 million second or third homes.
What's wrong with that, Ben?
Nothing. Like I'm absolutely have no problem with anyone using their money for whatever they want to, but it didn't actually feel, I didn't really feel like I was contributing to anything that had to happen, right? So with my interest in sustainability, I couldn't really argue that I was reducing carbon emissions, because people at that financial level, if they don't hire my, firm, Zero Energy Design, which does amazing work relative to sustainability, they're just going to hire someone else. So the only impact we're making is how much better we are than the next firm. And what I wanted to figure out was, how do we sort of expand that market? How do we actually reach people that were never considering sustainable design, instead of just cherry picking the people that have the most money that were already convinced that that's what they wanted? And when you think about it, it takes just as long to design a affordable house as it does an expensive house. You just get paid a lot less. And what we ended up doing was saying, well, how do we actually make money by just sort of giving design away for free? If we think the designs are good, they can save people energy, they can be a better investment by having minimal construction upgrade costs, but actually lowering your monthly bills. We said, well, let's give this away and let's figure out a different way to monetize it. And what we did is we published these designs for free. This was around 2007. Raised a bunch of capital, sort of the second wave of kind of .coms. Did a startup called Free Green, won a bunch of business plan competitions, and launched, and very quickly became the largest supplier of home designs in the country, particularly because we were offering something for free that other people were paying for.
I imagine that you take a lot of pride in what you do, but that you want to get joy and happiness out of what you do. So what part of the decision was in the transition was to get happiness and contentment?
Well, that didn't come until more of my mid 30s, right? So it sort of went from architecture to then, don't like this sort of one-to-one service aspect of that. I don't really feel like I can reach as many people as I would like. So then did the tech company, because that sounded cool. I thought it was really smart in 2007 raising money. I did a PowerPoint presentation. They gave me like $1 million like for this idea. Like, wow, my ideas are super valuable. And then 2008 happens. The whole residential real estate market crashes. A lot of the people that had contracted with us already for advertising agreements all sort of either went under or their advertising budgets dried up. And I realized, I wasn't as smart as I thought. I was being opportunistic around an environment at that time that was very advantageous for what I had to offer. 2008 to 2013 was sort of struggle to sort of keep that company afloat. Eventually, we built it back up, survived that temporary downturn, and got acquired. And then that's when I started looking to individual content creation, because what I saw then was, okay, I had the right idea of delivering design as a type of media monetized as marketing, rather than selling someone that's just paper or intangible. I'm sure you must run into it to a certain degree, is that people, especially, was talking to a friend that does IP law, and he says that people just want to buy an NDA from him.
Oh yeah.
He's like, no, you're paying for the consolidation of my ideas, experiences, and thoughts into this document, and that's what makes the document valuable. With design, it's hard to sort of convince people why those documents are so valuable. I always say that if there's resistance from the customer at that point, just assume that they're right and then figure out a different way to extract value out of that relationship.
Tell us about the bet that you made regarding manufacturing that got you to venture into creating the digital content.
Right. So once the tech company got acquired, I was sort of trying to figure out what to do next. I knew it was going to be related to that idea of sort of design as media. It just allows you to reach a lot of people and also lets you have more creative control. But I still wasn't exactly sure how to go about implementing it. I knew it would be involved with video because the internet was going that way. But I was having drinks with one of my friends from grad school, and he was sort of complaining and just saying about, he's was working on some furniture designs, and he just got the cost information back, and he was like, it's going to be so expensive. I thought this was going to be affordable, but it's not. And he was saying it's just impossible. Like, you can't make anything in America that's affordable. It's just, labor is too much, manufacturing is too complicated, you spend too much money on legal protection and all these things. And I said, I bet you I can get 1,000 pieces of furniture delivered around the country for less than IKEA. And he's like, there's no way, because IKEA has, I think it's like, over 50,000 employees, all these trucks, ships. They own their own forests, I believe. So they're so vertically integrated and they have so much capital infrastructure. People assume that that's what makes their end product so cheap. And me just sort of being a guy with a circular saw and a drill, the very basic power tools, how am I going to compete by delivering a product to people for less than that? But I was just going to take a shortcut. So what I did was I just made a YouTube video that involved me taking a 5-gallon bucket, put in 3 inches of concrete in the bottom, stuck in 3 sticks, waited 24 hours, and then popped out a 3-legged stool. And the video didn't go viral or anything. It probably did like 50 to 100,000 views in the first 6 months, which is, not a huge number for the internet, but it's still, imagine presenting to a stadium full of people. It's still still a large amount of people. But what was really interesting is that a large amount of those people that watched it saw how easy it was, and they started making their own and then posting them on Instagram or Facebook more at that time. And eventually we got to that sort of 1,000 numbers, and I was able to win the bet, right? Because what he didn't account for was me just sort of hijacking the process, right? So if I don't have my own shipping lines and forests and all those things, well, then I'll just refer people towards other ones. So I just
like, what in your brain allows you to reverse engineer that process?
I don't want to say thinking outside of the box, but thinking desperately. Like, if you just had to do it, you're either going to, as if your life depended on it, you'd figure it out, right? And it says, can you simulate that urgency?
How do you do that? You
start by giving yourself permission to, and just being like, anything at this point is fair game.
How did you get out of that box?
For me, it's never been that hard. But I see the struggle with other people. And what I always suggest is, if you're in a relationship with an industry, like, whether you've committed a huge amount of time to invest in your architecture education or your law education or your medical, you worry about moving away from those rules. The more you invest, the more you're sort of pot committed to that profession. And the more you're sort of subscribed to those cultural values, each one of these sort of areas of endeavor have their own kind of, not just legal rules to sort of define them as professions, they also have their own cultural practices and biases, some of which aren't really totally logical or aren't really clearly defined. So it's great to follow those things if you're getting everything you want out of that relationship. So if you're practicing as an architect and every day you're just excited to wake up, like my business partner at the firm is, and run that firm because it's the right lifestyle fit for you. If you're in a good relationship with that, then play by the rules. If you're not getting what you want out of it, then it's time to sort of change things.
That's so good.
And I always felt that like I could try to change architecture, and I pushed back on some boundaries and manipulated some things here, but I don't think I'm so arrogant to think that me as just one person is going to change this thing that's been around for a really, really long time. So I don't want to, take on this Sisyphusian task of trying to change this age-old institution.
What about your peers? So your peers must be high and elite and the type of people that would look down on moving from having an architectural firm to being a YouTuber.
So money is the great equalizer there, right? So I think early on there was some eyebrows raised about like, seriously, you're spent a lot of money on that education and now you're making YouTube videos? Because I think when people think YouTube, think of this low kind of media.
Sure.
And totally understandable. They don't think of it with the same, they don't think it has the same degree of prestige as like network television and all those things. And maybe they're right, but it looks like he has a lot of opportunities and looks like he's making decent money and looks like he's building in cool things and going to cool places. So you don't have to worry about those things early. You just have to worry about them later.
Is this the happiest you've been in your career?
I think I've always been pretty happy. Like I don't think I was ever like so unhappy in architecture. I just didn't see it as like a great fit and was looking for other options. I think the key is to leave before you're unhappy. Because
Right.
if you're unhappy, then you've probably made some other people unhappy as well.
Sure.
So I think pulling the plug at dissatisfied. So I always say, the minute you start to feel a little bit dissatisfied, don't pull the plug, but start experimenting. Start like planting seeds, putting out feelers sort of around the periphery of what you're already doing. Start to sort of lay the stage work so that if you do get towards the point of dissatisfaction, you already see some things started. So you don't want to wait until you're like frustrated, hate going to work and all those things to then be like, you know what, now I'm just going to jump into something new.
Can you tell us, why did you decide to build a container home? What is it about? And what's the real reason behind this thing?
Yeah. So we built a house out of shipping containers. It was about 5 years into starting Homemade Modern, which is when we started making YouTube videos for the DIY furniture stuff.
And it's in Joshua Tree. Right?
It's in Joshua Tree. We started, with our first project, I think was a vase, and that was in year one. And then we did a stool, and then we moved up to dining tables and sofas. Then we did remodel the whole bathroom, built out a kitchen. And then about 4 to 5 years in, we were ready. Oh, you know what? I think we're ready to build a whole house. And we were saying, well, if we're going to, put all this time and money into building a house to make a video series, how do we make sure there's enough of an audience to support that investment? Because this is the most sizable thing content-wise I'd ever done. So we signed on Home Depot as a sponsor.
Wow.
Which was great. It was, I think it still is the biggest single like social media build project that they've ever done.
Wow.
And when we were thinking about where to do it, they had originally wanted me to do it just outside of Atlanta because that's where they're based. It'd be easy for all their executives to come in and see it. And I was looking at like where, because I was going to end up owning the house, as where would be the best investment as a vacation property. And the thing that sort of struck me was I started looking land near national parks. And my thesis, which proved out to be pretty correct, was that I can't imagine nature ever getting less valuable, right? Like I think nature will only get rarer and more valuable the more civilization builds up and the more population increases. And that was based on a theory that I've had previously, where if you look back in like the 1960s or even the 50s, furniture made out of plastic was marketed as a premium thing. They're like genuine plastic furniture because it was newer and rarer, right? And then it becomes so common that the value goes down, or early on with woodworking, people said, oh, this woodwork is so good, he can make a board perfectly flat. It's really hard to make a board perfectly flat when you have an axe. The minute you have power tools, it becomes really easy, and then it's not becomes as valuable. And the minute you get really good at making power tools that can make a board perfectly flat, get nice flat wooden flooring, you know what becomes valuable? Hand chiseled flooring that looks like it's like done the old way, because that's then seen as the valuable thing because it's rare. So,
and you got a sponsorship from Home Depot. That's about as a big of a sponsorship as you can get. What advice do you have for people that want to monetize their content and they look at you and they say, I can never get Home Depot? What am I supposed to do to monetize this content?
First, don't assume that you understand how media works, right? So people think of everything as digital media as scaled down television, but it's really not. It's a lot more than that. So there's this sort of myth out there that when brands hire an influencer or a content creator for a campaign, they think that they're paying to reach their audience. And that's a little tiny part of the value, but to me is the most insignificant part, right? Because I don't want to ever compete with Facebook or Google. They're just efficient behemoths. They're so good at what they do. I want to compete with a complicated process that involves multiple entities and creative production, because that's a really hard thing to scale. But since my operation is so small and the creative ideas and the production work is all contained within myself and just one or two other people from my team, I want to compete with multiple companies that have to meet together. So an example of that would be if a brand like Home Depot comes to me, my audience is a good size. We have over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and 100,000 here on Instagram, another couple 100,000 on Facebook. But that's insignificant to a company that is used to buying ads on a Super Bowl, right? Like where they're buying hundreds of millions of eyeballs at once. And the project management just to work individually on a one-off basis with, even though I'm big in my genre, doesn't make a lot of sense for them. So what they want is a whole bunch of creative ideas and creative production that they can then do ad spend behind on Facebook, Google, YouTube, and all these other platforms, so that they can then decide how much money do we want to put behind the content I create to then reach as many people as they want beyond my audience.
And so going into the content creation aspect, how does having a large corporate benefactor like a Home Depot or a Lowe's impact how the creative process works for you?
That's different with every person. For me, I like that. Like I like the cooking shows where they give you the special ingredients. To me, the constraints are a good thing. And if you think of yourself as an artist and that your vision, no matter what it is really valuable, those things can be really frustrating because you're like, no, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to work with this quartz countertop that you're giving me with, because that's what you want to push as a company.
So you don't feel like a sellout for using a Home Depot.
I always think like the sellout thing is interesting. I think the sellout thing more speaks to a change in viewer expectation than it does to the actual business model. So if you are getting into content creation, you don't want to start off with this super pious nature of like, oh, I just love my fans and all this stuff. If you want to look ahead to where you think you want to be and be consistent to the audience. I mean, obviously things will change as things get bigger. Can't answer all the emails and all that stuff. But for me, it's like I've never set up like a Patreon or like ask people to buy my merch or stuff like that. I always knew from day one, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to blow it up nice and big. I'm going to take all kinds of sponsorship money. I'm going to embrace the challenge of trying to move product for other people. And I'm going to be really unconflicted about it. Like, I don't see, like, I see so many people in my space that are very apologetic about having a sponsor. And I'm not. Like, I would be apologetic if I was also then asking for Patreon money on top of it, right? Like,
that makes sense.
I don't mind PBS doing their drives for getting money, right? But if they're also then running a whole bunch of Tide ads like right after that, it'd be like, whoa, don't.
How do you go get the sponsorship money?
First, you understand what you're good at, right? And so the audience isn't what you're good at. The audience is what other people enjoy about the final product. if you're really quick and efficient at ad-libbing around any sort of physical item, then you want to pitch a whole bunch of different products, companies that have a hard time making their product sexy and interesting in content. So the first sponsor that I got, I think we only had like 5,000 to 10,000 subscribers, which is not a lot on. I mean, it's still a lot of people, but I pitched the power tool company Ryobi. I said, hey, I've made 2 or 3 videos. They've done a few thousand views each. I've always used your tools. I've always liked them. Will you send me some free tools? And I'm planning on doing 20 to 30 of these videos a year. And I don't have a big audience yet, but I'll give you video clips and footage of me using the tools that you can use in your commercials, right? And I'll give you still photos of your tools with finished DIY projects. And that way they can populate their social media feeds with that content. Now, the dollar value of my audience then is nothing, right? It was like, I would get maybe like $5 a post if I did anything, right? Because you could just, again, spend that money on a Facebook ad and reach those 5,000 people for pennies. But if they were to hire a photographer and then they had to hire someone to stage the photograph, or if they were to hire a videographer and then on-screen talent and then someone to come up with the creative idea for the project, that would cost them a lot of money. So at that point, my audience was small, but the production, if it's theoretically good, is still very valuable because they would have to spend money to get that.
Let's say you were doing it for architecture or for the law.
Right.
Where would you go after?
So law would be interesting, right? Because the thing that where our content genres or our content verticals have a lot in common is that we don't need a lot of customers or a lot of audience to matter, right? So if you're Logan Paul and you're selling, bubble gum or something like that, you have to reach a lot of people to make ROI for a product that's only like a few dollars, even if somebody is convinced by the messaging. But even if I only have an audience of, let's say, 1,000 people, but I'm really good at kitchen remodels, and the average kitchen remodel people are going to spend $10,000 to $30,000 on. If 100 people then are influenced and are going to go spend $10,000 and be influenced by my product suggestions, even at a really small audience size, that's really valuable. And so targeting is the other thing. I mean, that's why Facebook's such a valuable company. It's not just the sheer numbers they have, it's the specificity where you don't have to just spend to advertise shaving cream to 11-year-old girls. You're so well targeted that you can only spend money on reaching the people that you actually want. If you're cultivating an audience around people that are interested in the law, then an LSTAT like prep course or something like that, or something that prepares you for like the bar exam or something like that, that would be the sponsor that you want. So you don't want to think about it too indirectly as, I got to get this big audience and then I'm worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you have a specific audience, that's incredibly valuable. So if you were to say, who's the audience of this show? If I was just a guess, it's a podcast, but in nature of the medium and it's digital. So it's going to be a younger group of people. There'll probably be some people that are affiliated with the law, meaning paralegals, people in law school that are kind of just like trying to figure out what the profession's actually like before they get into it. I know a lot of architecture students listen to a lot of the design podcasts because they're trying to sort of, you're much more, when you're in grammar school, you're interested about what's it like to be in high school, right? And when you're in high school, you're interested about what it's like to be in college.
Right.
Well, if you're sort of before you go to law school, you're interested in what happens when you get out of it and these kind of things.
Right. And when you're a lawyer, you're interested in what's life like after retirement.
Exactly. It's really just taking the work part seriously and not just sort of yada-yadaing it and being like, oh, just get a big audience and then we get a big paycheck to reach those people. There's value at every sort of stage.
So I saw you made a modern gazebo using bamboo poles. Is this really something a Jew like me can do without any DIY experience?
From what I remember of like the Old Testament, I'm pretty sure that the Jews were pretty crafty at a lot of things.
Somehow it hasn't made its way down the pipeline.
Right, like we came up with the book of Numbers at some point, but what that reads like a zoning code, but it's not like any of us know how to do any of this stuff.
Right. So if you guys pulled off like the Ark of the Tabernacle and all that stuff, I'm sure you could strap a few bamboo poles together. I think it's
really like the stuff that you do, what's your expectation of the type of sophistication somebody really has to have in order to be able to like do these projects that you post all the time?
It varies, right? Like, so some of my projects, like one of the most viewed projects that I've done is a spiral staircase that I use a robot to cut it out. So it requires expertise with 3D modeling and high-tech software. It involves a inexpensive but complicated machine, and then it involves like some knowledge of construction. So that video, it's been syndicated. It's probably done over 50 million views on its own at this point, but not a lot of people have built it. So how is that video valuable to me? Well, one, it got me a lot of new subscribers and expanded my reach. So it was an audience builder, and I got a lot of money from YouTube for just the AdSense for generic ads that they're running on my YouTube videos. But it wasn't very valuable in terms of pitching to Home Depot. Hey, sponsor me for this next video where I'm going to use your circular saw in it, and then it'll make people want to buy it because they can have a very realistic vision of it.
Because nobody's going to actually build the staircase.
Right. But
how are 3D printers factoring into this whole game, where someone like me who'd never be able to carve out the stairs, if I had the right kind of printer, I might pursue a project like this?
It's similar to 2D printers, where they're really good at some things, but it's still quicker to just write other things on a sticky note and stick it there. Also, 3D printers work like 2D printers, and 2D printers don't work that well, right? So there was these fears that 3D printers were going to disrupt Amazon and people will just download files and 3D print them. You know how I knew that was never going to happen, even with the scalability of technology, is that, have you ever said, you know what, I really want this book, but instead of buying it from Amazon, I'm going to print it on my inkjet printer, warm up the Hewlett Packard. I'm going to print out all these pages, and then I'm going to bind them myself together. No, the centralized printers are still more efficient than the home-based inkjet printer. So it's not about the inkjet printer being good enough to disrupt traditional printing. It's really about centralization versus decentralization. So 3D printers are great, but even as the home-based units get better, there'll be an industrial size unit that is even way better that minimizes how much disruption will happen in those kind of things. Okay,
so affordable housing. I know you're super passionate about it. Tell us, what is affordable housing, why we should care about it, and what you're going to do to change about it.
So when I was building the shipping container house, we built a very nice house, like just under 1,000 square feet, spent about $200,000 to do it, which in California is extraordinarily low. It's turned into an outstanding income property. We put it up on Airbnb, and it's producing great revenue for us. And the one of the things that was kind of frustrating about the process was just seeing how much regulation you have to go through, particularly in a state like California, to get anything built. 5% of the construction budget went towards fire sprinklers in a house that's made out of entirely in steel, surrounded by rocks and gravel because it's in like a desert with no vegetation. So it's like, did we really need to spend 5% of the construction budget on something that doesn't even lower our insurance because it protects us from fire? It actually raises your insurance because it's way more likely for your fire sprinkler system to malfunction and flood the house and get mold and water damage than it is to protect you from fire.
Right.
But this is, a statewide thing. So
what's the crisis? What's the affordable housing crisis?
I'm surprised at the number of people I meet that live in LA that make good money, like graphic designers, production people that are making between couples like 60 to 90,000. So they have a decent household income. When you look at their options for what kind of homes they can purchase, they're just not really there. And so that's,
I think if you raised it to like $300,000 or $400,000 combined, there's
right.
not a great option.
And so those are the people that are leaving for the bordering states or stuff like that. But one of the other problems, and so the regulation side is above my pay grade. I'm not interested in getting into that area of sort of endeavor of changing those things, but I still think there's some things that can be done. So one, smaller houses, right? The average new home that is constructed for a single family house is over 2,000 square feet. Meanwhile, families are getting smaller and smaller. People are having children later. People are living more informally, like dining rooms become less important. So the first thing will be making smaller homes. Now, not tiny homes that feel like you're living in a van, but just homes that are maybe half the size. Like, I think it's reasonable that if you talk to people in New York and be like, oh, can a couple with one kid live comfortably in a 1,200 square foot apartment? They'd be like, yeah,
absolutely.
That's pretty great. But imagine having a 1,200 square foot house with a yard, and for that same size family. But the nice version of that house doesn't exist that much in Southern California, unless it's like a really old little craftsman bungalow or something. So one, there is build smaller houses, and then the other one is, if you look at where the money for new construction goes to, more than half of the construction budget is for labor. So what you do is you do a combination of smaller houses and reducing the amount of labor going into them. And so that involves making things that are simpler, but luckily that's the way sort of aesthetic tastes are going. People are less about their 3-piece suits, and you can be really successful wearing jeans and a hoodie. And you're seeing that in the home environment. As much as there's, people still like crystal chandeliers, people still also like concrete floors now, and like kind of more rustic things. Absolutely. It just feels like minimal, clean, simple, and a little bit less ostentatious. So there's a way we can capitalize on that trend, build houses that are smaller, and then also, this is where the legal side is interesting, take advantage of some of the new legislation that has been meant to try to address this crisis in part, and that's California's new ADU laws, which are really interesting. So basically, on a state level, they've...
and so let's dumb this down. What is an ADU?
It's an accessory dwelling unit, also known as like a guest house or granny's quarters or something like that. So it used to be really difficult to do these. Like the zoning rules were different city to city, county to county. And so the state said, look, we need more units. We need more supply. So let's just make it from a state level much easier to build a guest house that you can rent out in your backyard. And they made a statewide rule that made that a lot easier. And so one of our big projects this year is to completely document the process of how you go about doing this. So we're actually using my parents' house as sort of like a guinea pig. Shout out to mom and dad. And they have a very typical suburban house. It's like a little bit less than a 1/4 acre lot. It's built in the 1960s.
You have a sponsor yet?
Yeah.
Man, that's amazing.
And yeah, so we're going to show.
Money.
We're basically going to make probably like an hour-long documentary about how do you go to permits, who do you talk to at the building department.
This is all obviously for California.
Yeah,
and your folks are in Santa Barbara.
Just north of Santa Barbara. Yeah.
Cool.
So we'll make a whole documentary that shows you exactly how this can be done.
I don't know why I thought for a second you're going to get back into the architecture game and do it for a bunch and like start working for people. No, you're going to put the content out there, let the people use it.
Well, the content first, right? And the reason what's been fascinating to me is that when I got into the content game, I knew I was going sort of what people would see as sort of downstream, going towards a broader but lower end audience. Like my architecture clients for our firm were all wealthy, super successful, really smart people. And now I'm in a world of like internet comments, which is not that. It's the utter opposite. But what's interesting is with volume, you still dig up a lot of opportunities. So I thought I was completely moving away from kind of high-end custom opportunity. I thought I was moving away from sort of prestige design clients, but I'm doing the right thing. So I'll be sort of a Johnny Appleseed, man of the people kind of thing. And that's mostly happened, but there's still, what's interesting is I get more sort of high-end commission requests now, even though all the work is on the low end. And I kind of think
they trust you.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's they trust me. I think people just reach out to what they see, right? So I think like Guy Fieri, you know that?
I definitely know who.
You know,
Drivers, diners, and dive-ins.
Diners, drive-ins, and dives.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Still
Lou's
just-
always there to back me up.
Still hanging on to the frosted tip game in
It's
2020. It's impressive that his level of commitment to something that I think was like kind of a deal in like the 90s.
Yeah.
Just holding down, bowling shirts and bad Varney sunglasses. But I'm sure that guy gets tons of requests for sort of like high-end catering built
sure.
off of the brand of, kind of like diners, drive-ins and things like that. I'm sure you get asked for legal advice that's totally outside of your specialty or expertise. People ask the lawyer that they know about everything.
Ask us, guys.
Yeah.
Anything.
I
got you.
I have a friend that's an anesthesiologist, but she still gets asked every medical question from all of her friends, regardless of
Do you know how to argue a
expertise.
Supreme Court case?
Yes.
Not particularly, but I can
Right.
give my
Can you
best
help me
shot.
plan my will? Like, is it illegal if I tell my employees that they can only eat vegan food in the office? Right. Like,
Lewis will tell you the answer to that.
So people reach out to what they know and what they're comfortable and familiar with. So if they see someone that's designing and demonstrating competency that's totally separate from what they need, they'll still ask that person before they actually do research to go hunt that person down.
Final question before we get to the other segments. Why is there hope for the future of housing?
Simply because the demand's high and there's so much economic opportunity in it. The same thing with healthcare, I would say, is that there'll be a rough point where we realize how frustrated and how broken the current system is. But that creates sort of a bottleneck of entrepreneurial opportunity. And that's where you'll start to see people sort of experiment. The other thing that I would say is that it seems to be an issue that, at least at the state level, and I think at most of the municipalities here in California, they're starting to realize it and take actions like this sort of ADU law. I think the biggest challenge to sort of doing it will be getting the banks to sort of offer financing for unusual construction projects that don't have the quite the sort of the legacy of comps that sort of more traditional things do, and insurance companies and things like that. But there'll be an awkward moment, and then it'll just start happening all at once.
Sounds good. All right, let's go to the deal of the week. I'm going to start with you, Ben. What is your deal of the week?
I just saw this Netflix documentary called "Don't F with Cats." It was
very crazy.
It was wild.
Yeah.
It was really wild. So one, I'm recommending it. One, it's sensational and it appeals to all audiences. Like my parents liked it, my sister liked it, I liked it. It's super engaging, entertaining, but it's also a great example of a phenomena that could be used. I mean, in this way, it was kind of used for novel good, like a bunch of vigilantes helped the police track down this person. But it's a trend that's really powerful towards problem solving that I think we'll see appearing and hopefully used for good a lot in the future.
That's awesome. Lou, what's your deal of the week?
Don't confuse cheating with taking shortcuts. Taking shortcuts is fine. Cheating your ass off is not.
What are you referring to, Lou?
What I'm referring to is the greatest scandal in 21st century sports. The Houston Astros using video cameras pointed at the catcher's glove to steal signs in real time and then bang on a trash can to communicate them to opposing hitters.
Could that really help you hit a curveball?
Oh, it absolutely can. If you know a curveball's coming instead of a fastball, you're going to gear up and sit on that breaking ball, or you're going to spit at it. Either one, you have an advantage because you know what's coming. So we're all in favor of taking shortcuts, finding efficiencies, but don't think you're a genius just because you found some way to cheat the system.
The man said don't cheat. You listen to the man. Okay, my deal of the week. So unfortunately, regarding housing, I've had a couple tough leaks at my house. Brutal, cause a lot of damage. This is what you want to do. You want to get the Flow device by Moen. Not an advertisement, but it's a great device. It helps you basically avoid leaks and pipes breaking in your house, and it alerts you on your smartphone if anything's happening. It lets you know exactly what's going on. Great device. Go get it. So here we are. It's the legal tip of the week time, guys. So we have this awesome firm, Smith & Benowitz. We're still trying to figure out who they are. They apparently do employment, personal injury, class action. They're really cool guys because they sponsor us, and we really appreciate it. All right. Today we talked about the affordable housing crisis. So today let's shine a little bright on the law that's around, one of the pieces of law that surrounds housing, landlord-tenant law. There are lawyers that handle disputes that arise between landlords and tenants. So landlord-tenant law has a lot of complexity. Not surprisingly, a lot of it favors the landlord because they own all the property. And so some landlord-tenant lawyers charge by the hour. They're typically $200 to $500 per hour. Some of them do a flat rate fee. We just wanted to give a little background on the types of law that surround the topics that we're discussing. So there's also some nonprofit agencies that help lower income people that can't afford lawyers. So if you need help, reach out to those organizations. You could always reach out to us. We could always be a guide to you to help you find the right fit. So now to the actual legal tip of the week. Ben, how do lawyers help you provide the service that you provide?
We use them a lot for the real estate transactions, right? So it's really important when you're, doing title and all those kind of things and transferring it. I always like to have a lawyer go over all the sort of closing documents and stuff like that. Particularly if I have investors involved with a sort of a real estate project. Then again, we use lawyers for a lot of our NDAs. So sometimes I'll produce a design for something that could end up being a product, and we need to get prototypes made by a factory. Having non-disclosure agreements to kind of make sure and protect your IP. So I mostly use, I would say, like lawyers that specialize in real estate, ones that deal with sort of IP and sort of work with inventors or designers. And then everything else is sort of pretty boilerplate when it comes to sort of contracts and stuff like that.
Cool. Lewis, what's your legal tip of the week?
If you are a renter, which encompasses a lot of the people we representing ordinary employees, injury victims, go figure out where in your area has rent control laws, where has the strongest rent control laws, and recognize that rent control could be a valuable asset that gives you a lot of flexibility in life, and the only person who really loses from it's your landlord.
Awesome. So my legal tip of the week, it's a combination of a legal and insurance tip. So if you're a homeowner, if you rent, you want to have the best renter's insurance or homeowner's insurance possible. Crazy things happen. Even if you're a renter, your landlord could be a moron and do something crazy and end up having you responsible for something that happens on the property. Property could be damaged. People can be hurt. You want to make sure that you're covered. We don't love insurance companies around here, but we do believe in having the insurance in place so that you could sue them if they don't take care of you. That's our legal tip of the week. Ben, it's been a pleasure to have you. We really appreciate it. We're going to continue watching your videos. I'm going to continue pretending that I'm going to do DIY projects.
I would argue that you already do a lot of DIY projects. Do you cook?
Never.
Like once a week,
Like
once a month?
When Julie's sick, which is thankfully very rarely.
But you can pull it off, right?
Yeah.
And then when you do it, you can kind of expand upon those. So making your own stuff is kind of like cooking. Nobody should cook all their own meals. Like it's great to experience somebody else's skill, somebody else's sort of palate by going out to restaurants or dining with friends. But it's also a good idea to be able to cook a few things. And I kind of think the same way with sort of making stuff for yourself. It's very liberating to be able to do just a few basic things that you can alter, customize, improve your sort of daily routine. So for example, being able to install like coat hooks and just a shelf right where you need it.
That.
Those can really speed up your daily routine, right? If you have a perfect place to charge your phone that's right next to your bed, if you have a place to hang your book bag as soon as you come in the front door, those things, if they're part of your routine and you now have every day your living room is a little tidier because you're not setting it on the sofa.
Tell me you have a video for all the things you just described. Yep. Okay, where do we find this guy on YouTube and everywhere else?
Just YouTube, just search Homemade Modern to see all the DIY furniture projects. And if you want to see how we built the shipping container house, bought the land, went through the permitting and did all of that, just look for the Modern Home Project.
Love it. Awesome. Guys, really appreciate you staying with us. See you next week. Let's do it.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Arian, they're asking where they could find us. So for LawFlip, it's at LawFlip and LawFlip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury, employment, and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and SmithBenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benjy Smith and BenjySmith.com. At Wages Guru and LewisBenowitz.com for Lewis. Oh, so LawFlip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Arian Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Pen Practice. Pen Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the LawFlip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garret, Whisten, and Travis Nagle. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. A huge thank you to Aaron and Vanessa from Smith & Benowitz for endlessly dealing with all of our podcast bullshit. And lastly, a huge thank you to our beautiful wives, Julie and Lisa, for supporting our vision, and all the love to all of our 4 boys combined. Disclaimer, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.